Well, hello again everybody. Welcome to Puppets with Richard and Judy. Lovely to be back again today. And I think most of you know that Richard and I met on Terrorhawks. And yesterday we talked a little bit about the lip sync for the puppets on Terrorhawks. And Zelda went into action and the audience did a fantastic job on practice lip syncing, which was wonderful. So I was also the main person doing the zeroids. So Richard's been working quite hard to get this zeroid back and working again. I'm going to pass over to Richard's now. We're going to go over and do a bit of a zeroid demonstration.
Hi, it was a great pleasure to meet Jerry and Christine on Terrorhawks when we started developing this type of puppet. And it was just a sort of great experience really to work with them and basically do a new type of puppet, which obviously was the Zelda puppet. But the interesting thing was the zeroid, which the zeroid's a very important part of the whole setup basically. And we had basically one hero zeroid, which is Sergeant Major Zero, and he did the most of the action that you see on the series. And up to sometimes he would take 5 operators, but we've got some of the original mechanisms working on. This is the actual Sergeant Major Zero. So basically, he's actually a handmade steel ball, basically, which was spun metal, and inside he's got somewhere in the region of about 10 servos. And out of this, you can see we could start to get all sorts of different character action with him. I don't know if anybody wants to come up and have a go at this. Anybody got any volunteers?
And whilst we're just getting those volunteers in place, I think it's also quite fun to mention that what we don't have working here is the lights in the mouth. And I used to be the mouth operator, and I don't know if you noticed, but Sergeant Major Zero had a completely different lip sync pattern than the other hero, Zeroid. And so basically I would light up the top section here, and the bottom section here, and the middle one there for stroll on. So it'd be stroll on. And then the other zero would sort of have a ripply, slightly fun type pattern. And also, these little eyes in here divided into 9 little LEDs. And I had a little pad with 9 switches on, which I would go like this, so that there was a sort of ripple effect on the actual eyes. And then, of course, you may be asking yourself, how did the Zeroid move? And it was very high-tech, wasn't it, Richard? So, when he was moving on the plinth here, it was basically a stick going from underneath to move him, to give him a little bit of a wobble on the perch. And then what we do was, before the Zero moved anywhere, you might notice he always shut his eyes. And then what we do is replace him with effectively a rubber ball. Have a cutaway shot, put the rubber ball on the stand, and Richard's doing this bit.
The funny thing was, we would shoot him off the perch with compressed air, and when we wanted him to come back on, we would just reverse the film. And if we needed the zeros to stop being shot, the balls would be put on a little ring of black tack, and we would shoot them off the spot, reverse the film, the balls would roll into shot, and then we'd replace the ball with the hero. And that's how all the zeroid shots were done. And funny thing about it is, if you look at some of the shots, you can actually see the little ring of black tack in shot at the start of the shot that the ball rolls onto.
And there is one other feature that's working. I'm not sure which control it is. I don't know who's got it. But you should be able to see the little flap where the gun came out. Have you got it there? There we go. There we go. There's the flat. And then again, the flap coming out. There will be compressed air to shoot the gun out like this. The gun would come out of his head that way. So there we go. I'm not sure. Well done. Good flap operation there. Is it you that's got it? Oh, well done. Round of applause for our helper down here. Excellent. Let's just find out his name. He's only 8 years old. What a fantastic operation. Give him a big clap, everybody. Fantastic. Okay, so Rich was saying how lucky we were to work on Terrorwalks and to meet Jerry and to work with Christine. And after Terrorwalks, it was quite interesting because in some ways there was a renewed interest going back to the earlier puppets, the days of Thunderbirds and Captain Scarlet. And I actually worked with Christine and Jerry on a show called What's Up Doc. It was a live Saturday morning show coming out of TBS in Maidstone. And Jerry came on the show, actually twice. He came on once with Thunderbirds, once with Captain Scarlet. And actually Christine did a live performance and she was absolutely superb. And we've got some of the puppets here today, which we're just going to talk about. So yes, so I think it was Scott, yes, I think we had Scott. So Scott was on live television. And we've been doing a few puppetry lessons with people, so we're just going to talk a little bit more about the stringing and how they actually work, because one of the things that's quite unique is the way that the weight of the puppet is actually just taken on 3 strings, and they go essentially to the head. And a lot of other marionettes, the strings actually come from the shoulders, so it's actually quite unusual. So, Rich, you're going to do a little... Okay. Right, so Rich is going to hold it. So we've got the main strings running to the heads and the shoulders, and then we've also got 2 separate bars here, and one operates the hands, so Rich is just doing that now. Very good. He's going to bring one hand forward, shake my hand. Excellent. There we go. Very good. And then, of course, there's the nutty old problem of walking, which is actually quite difficult. I know some of you've tried to give it a go, and it's not as easy as it looks. So, Richard's going to swap the bars around. This is Christine's personal puppet, and her advice to Richard when he was helping operate would be to give it a flick on the handbar. So there we go. Excellent. Very good. Excellent. And that's not all bad. There's another Richard who's volunteered to come up on stage. He's had a puppetry lesson this morning, so we're going to see how he's doing. Welcome, Richard. Here he comes. He's going to give it a go. Right, here we go. So, a little bit of a flick of the handbar. Oh, very good. That's excellent. And turn of. Oh, it's going to give it another go. Here we go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Excellent, lovely. Now, what you're going to do, Richard? Excellent, very good. You're going to now demonstrate the eyes and the eye line. So, on these puppets, the puppeteers operated the eyes. Whereas, of course, on the Terrorwalk puppets, the eyes were operated by the floor puppeteer, who was above the ground, because the puppeteers were actually under the ground, so they were done on a remote. But on these original Thunderbirds puppet, there's a little mechanism in the middle there. You can see the eyes going from one side to the other. Excellent. Thank you very much. Very good. Round of applause. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to now pass over to Richard, because we're going to have a look at some of the other puppets. And I think in particular it's quite interesting to look at the different scale of the puppets, moving on to Captain Scarlet, because I think you can see how different the proportions of the puppet are. So I'm going to pass the microphone over to you, Richard, and say a bit more about that.
The interesting thing about the puppets is that obviously the caricature puppets can do a much more caricature performance. So when it gets to Captain Scarlet, they were now becoming very, very human, which was really restricting their movements. We can see this. But the Captain Scarlet puppets were virtually never ever walked because they had never successfully managed to convince Jerry that they looked good. So a lot of the time they would have literally been held down on the floor, and their legs would have been held rigid, and then they'd have very, very slight movements on the head, as the heads are actually perfectly in scale with the bodies. So you can see here, that's more the sort of action that you see on Captain Scarlet, rather than the more caricature action of Thunderbirds and Stingray. Yeah, the interesting thing about the eyes on the Captain Scarlet puppets was by the time that the puppet makers were actually constructing these puppets, it was they found it was impossible to actually reproduce a convincing looking human eye on this size. And Jerry came up with the idea of photographing the other types of artificial eyes which were made by a prosthetic eye maker, and actually cutting out the photographs of the iris and actually putting them into little acrylic spheres in the heads. So in ultra close-up, they actually look totally convincing.
One of the other projects was, of course, calling Elvis, the Dire Straits video. Has anyone seen that? Yeah, it's on YouTube. So that was fantastic because we also did marionette versions of all the Dire Straits musicians. And it was intercut with Thunderbird's original footage, so that's worth a look if you, it's on YouTube, so you can have a look at that. And then also, we've got Titan here. This was from the Kit Kat. Oh, Weetabix, sorry, oh, I'm getting my products muddled up.
This puppet was basically Christine made the original Titan for Stingray, and then basically when it was relaunched in the 90s, Weetabix did a promotion, and they wanted to use Stingray to do a television ad, and Christine then reproduced this puppet from what she had of the original. So this one was made in the early 90s, and up until recently he's been in pieces. I was actually restrung him about 3 or 4 days ago. But yeah, basically he was modelled on Laurence Olivier, apparently.
That's great. Now, have we got any more questions about these puppets? We should have a floating microphone somewhere. I'm not quite sure. Okay, any questions about the puppets? Over there.
It's more of a microphone now. I'm just wondering how, was there any difference, or whether it was easier or not?
In terms of the...
To hold those puppets up, you know, were the caricatured ones easier to use for a long length of time? Was there
Well, I think, are you talking about the marionettes now?
the actual marionettes?
Right. Well, I think one of the things about the marionettes is that these new versions are much lighter than the original, so it would have taken quite a lot of physicality to actually operate the original ones. Because you also have to remember that they were really, really high up on a bridge over the set, and the strings were very long, which makes it harder to operate because it takes a fraction of amount of time, but longer time when you actually move your hand for the actual movement to happen with the puppet. So I think both sets of marionettes would have been quite hard to operate, but I think particularly the Captain Scarlet puppets, because they're smaller and they're more defined. I think it was quite difficult to actually translate them to realistic movement, whereas if you've got the caricature puppet, you can kind of get away with a slightly, you know, the traditional quirky movement of Thunderbirds, but that's why you never saw Captain Scarlet really walking. He didn't really walk.
The interesting thing that happened was all of these puppets have been used on TV commercials or promotions and things like that, and they were all directed by Jerry. And the interesting thing was that when we got to work with the Scarlet puppets, because we had a similar setup to the original, which means the puppeteers were 6 feet above the puppets, when you went in ultra close on Scarlet or Blue, even a slight muscle shake on a puppeteer from holding the puppet for a couple of minutes would actually start to show as a tremor on the face, because the faces are so small. So it really shows the skill of the puppeteers.
Do we have any more questions coming from the floor? right, got a question down at the front.
Which
Which is your favourite Superman-Nation character?
My favourite Superman-Nation character. Oh, so you... Well, as a child, I have to say that Stingray was my favourite series. And I was quite inspired by Marina, which is a bit odd really, because she never spoke, and it's quite difficult to stop you talking at times. So I think I was a big fan of Stingray, personally. And then later on, obviously I'm interested in Thunderbirds, and my daughter loved Thunderbirds, so I sort of moved on to that. But actually, obviously I worked on Terrorhawks, so I think I particularly like Zelda and the characterisation of Zelda. And I'll ask Richard if he wants to say which is his favourite.
Well, it was a great privilege, as I said before, to work with Jerry. And then when I met with Christine, and I found she had a whole garage full of pieces of puppets that she'd removed from the studios when they closed them down. And then obviously, we started to construct my favourites, which are obviously Scott and Virgil, and followed by Scarlet and Blue, which for me was a very delight to work on.
Right, so at the end of this session, we're going to move the puppets back over to the area over there, so if you want to have a go with them, that would be great. And yesterday, we had a fantastic time with the Firestorm puppet of Sam. I don't know if some of you saw that demonstration. Unfortunately, they couldn't be here today, but hopefully Jamie is standing by, and we've got some footage of Sam walking and also of his face movements. So we've just about come to the close of what we want to say, and we're ready with those clips. I can't actually tell whether we've got the go ahead with that, but anyway, just like to say, oh yes, here we go. So thank you very much from Richard and Judy.
Second pass. The geese said keep an eye on those pods.
SFG, heavy fire coming in at green 180.
I see it. Wes, I need more power to the main drive thrusters.
SFG, base to Tornado. You are dangerously close to the Black Orchid weapon and cannon. Return to base immediately.
1 minute, Commander. The geese said stand by to fire oxynitrogen spread on my mark.
Ready, Sam.
5, 4, 3, 2,